Well, hello, hello, hello. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Larry Rosen. Larry is the founder of the Enemies Project, which has come to be a project that I'm a dear fan of, and I've pretty much plastered it to all of my friends everywhere that they need to watch these talks because they're just so powerful and so moving. I've definitely shed some tears just watching how powerful it is, the work that you do. Larry, you've been a peacemaker for over 2 decades now. You went to school to be a lawyer, went to UCLA, and you kind of found that there's another way to achieve something a little more meaningful given the skill set that you have. So you're a successful mediator. And by all rights, I believe you have a wait list. There's no financial reason, right, for you to be taking on another project like this, aside from just your true passion, and really is making a big difference. So I want to welcome you and just say I'm really excited to be speaking with you today.
Thank you, Jolie. I'm very happy to be here. And, um, I know that we have a very similar approach. We have very like minds. So I'm looking forward to sharing those.
As part of the Enemies Project, you get two strangers in a room with each other who are passionate believers of things that are seemingly in opposition, right? Two people who are seemingly diametrically opposed. And I love what you do because at first you say, all right, you try to have a conversation the way that you're used to. And it always ends up the same with people are very heated. It doesn't really go anywhere. It's just fighting back and forth. And then you say, let's try it another way. And we're going to get into this method that you have. It's I'm sure some people would see it like magic, right? If they don't understand right the principles that you're following. But
Hmm.
I guess to start, what do you think we're getting so wrong about seeing people that think differently than us and trying to have conversations with them to try to find peace? Most of us in the real world don't succeed at it the way you do in your shows. What do you think we're getting wrong for the most part?
I think that we try to convince people of stuff all the time, and it just doesn't work. It's like our natural inclination. And I actually, I'm pretty deeply into evolutionary psychology. And I believe that, traditionally these methods that we try to use worked in groups. Like you try to convince somebody, there are people around, they're going to come to your support, there are other people who are going to come to their support, and you're going to work it out. But one on one, it's just a disaster. We do not convince anybody, and we basically threaten each other. And the likelihood of us working through a difficult issue is really small. It's not that nobody can do it. Some people do it brilliantly, but the inclination to listen first is really not natural to most of us, including myself. If something's heated, like I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. And I've really had to try to dial down that inclination. And I've seen so many times that it doesn't work, that it's become more natural to me to dial it down, even just from a strategic level. Like that ain't gonna work, even if I'm really inclined to want to speak first,
Mm,
even if I'm not feeling particularly empathetic at that moment. But I think that the problem is us, our own nature, and that we no longer live in ways that we evolved. We live in these weird ways, online and in other places where there's really no community pushing us to work things out.
mm. It seems like most people view one route to peace, which is peace exists when we're all on the same page and believing the same thing. And it seems like that's where there's the disconnect and where there's the want to convince and show logic and facts and
Mm.
these logical, rational reasons.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work in your experience.
No, persuasion just doesn't work. I mean, attempts at persuasion don't work because people see that as an attack. And as soon as they view something as an attack, even if they're not sure how it's an attack, they're aware that you have an agenda. And so if they're aware of you have an agenda, their nervous system is just going to go on alert. And they're going to switch out of curiosity to self-protection. And
Mm,
they're going to protect all their stuff and use all their tools that they can. And so you citing facts before the other person believes that you are not a threat, before the other person believes that you're an ally or on their side, is almost necessarily going to back them up. And they're not going to have an, a truly curious conversation with you. And that's the problem, is that we don't establish that rapport first. And when the rapport starts to break, we push harder
mm.
rather than back up.
You talk in some of your work about this trance that we fall into,
Yeah.
specifically with people who we see as a threat or people who we might see as quote enemies, whether it's people on the left versus people on the right, people for one issue or against another issue. That there's actually something that's happening to our
Yeah.
brain, right? And you're talking a
Yeah.
little bit about like the neuro science behind it, but can you tell us a little bit about that trance that you?
Yeah. I call it the enemy trance. And basically, normally we're just empathetic and we understand each other pretty well. You know, even not even consciously, like you fall down, I know you're hurt. I just feel it. I don't have to think through it consciously. If you make if I say something offensive to you, you'll make a face that I understand. And I'll be like, "Oh, are you okay?" You know? But when we're under threat, like let's say I'm Jewish and you have really, really strong views of Jews because of what's happening in Israel, right? And you say some things that are, you know, uh, that I consider offensive. I'm not then going to um, feel what you feel. What happens is in my brain, empathy shuts down. Like as soon as I see another person as a threat, my empathy shuts down, and it means that I'm not going to understand them anymore. That's the real surprising thing. It's not only that I won't care about you, I won't understand you anymore, what your intentions are. And so there's a psychological change that happens when we believe we're under threat. And basically we have autistic psychopathy. Autistic in that we can no longer feel necessarily what the other person is feeling. It's not intuitive anymore. Empathy is shut down. We can't feel the other person. And psychopathy in that we no longer, since we can't feel them, we don't care about them. And so we become toward our enemies, we become these psychopaths. And not only psychopaths, but psychopaths who really can't feel, most psychopaths probably can't feel very well what other people are feeling. But that we enter this temporary state. And if I'm in that state, you know I'm going to trigger that state in you because I'm a huge threat if I cannot feel you and I don't care about you. And so this goes back and forth. And that's natural to human beings. It's basically a word dance. I call it the enemy dance. But it's
Mm,
absolutely natural to human beings. And it's been cranked in our present society. Um, and there's a way out of it, which is to exit that trance. And you exit that trance by getting the empathy system running again.
mm.
That's what I try to do is help people exit that trance. And they do for a little while, maybe permanently. But all of a sudden you see them looking at the other person differently, like, holy cow, you are not the person I believed you to be. Like in the transgender episode, Eve and Nancy looking at each other and saying, "You're beautiful. I had no idea." And that's always the case in almost in every episode. People are looking at the other person and saying, "I didn't understand you." And in almost every episode, they say, "Not only didn't I understand you, you're beautiful," because they're outside of the trance now.
Yeah. And maybe just for context, in case anybody hasn't listened to that episode,
Yeah.
super powerful and emotional episode. Can you give a brief summary of the two people that you had together and what
Yeah,
happened?
it's my favorite episode, even though it hasn't performed as well as some of the other ones, because the topic for the other ones, like Palestinian and a Jew, is just a more powerful topic for a lot of people. But Eve is a fully transitioned woman. And Nancy is a MAGA gender fundamentalist who believes that trans people belong in mental institutions. And so they meet and they start out and it's fireworks. Nancy says something like, "You're a genetically modified man. You belong in a mental institution." And Eve is just shocked. And so you can't imagine how this conversation is going to go well. And frankly, I wasn't sure. Like, wow, this is tough stuff. But they're actually two beautiful people. And and they have their reasons. Eve has a lot of pain associated with having transitioned and been rejected by her family, and that was, if presented in the right way, deeply touching to Nancy. It would not touch Nancy if Eve were hostile to Nancy. Eve did an amazing job in not being a threat to Nancy, understanding Nancy first, which allowed Nancy, the trance inside of her, to totally die in that moment.
Yeah.
And she came to love Eve. And then Eve likewise came to love Nancy. I mean, it was a beautiful transition from hostility to deep care. It doesn't mean that their positions changed, but you saw that these two people can really love each other and that this can happen in society. Again, it doesn't mean that Nancy suddenly believes that it's okay to have trans people near children. She doesn't still, but she doesn't believe that trans people are mentally ill anymore or that they should suffer in any way. So it's like a dial down from a 10 of vitriol to 5.
Mm.
And that's the goal for me. It's not for them to come to policy resolution. It's for them to be able to talk to each other. Because in society, if we can talk to each other, we can solve things. And they demonstrated that beautifully. But it was also just really, really touching what happened between the two of them.
Yeah, I have to say your ability to moderate that conversation where definitely recommend anybody listening to check out this episode. That's to go from a lady who at one point is saying you will never be a woman, you are a man, to at the end just looking at Eve and just saying you are so beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah, it was really touching. It was really touching.
It was,
And
and
I take a little bit of credit because I set it up and I do help them with the conversation. But these two people are really passionate and beautiful. And it and the power of the interaction has something to do with the setup, meaning me moderating and the techniques that I use. And it has also a lot to do with the people and how vulnerable they're willing to be and how far they can allow themselves to go with the other person.
And I imagine the extent to which they're able to be vulnerable is also reflectant of their ability to trust you to start, because you are really the person who's almost like co-regulating for everybody. When emotions get high, they have to trust that you're the one that's going to make sure it's
Definitely.
safe for everybody.
Yeah. And I do have a relationship with everybody who comes on, meaning I spend hours talking to them beforehand, interviewing them a couple of times.
I want to get into your solutions and your methods in a little bit, but before that, I want to kind of double down on this enemy trance. And I'm curious, where do you see it leading? If this trance and this dance just keeps going, right? If there are not enough people that are waking up to see that there is another way, I'm sure a lot of people are very confident there is not another way until they've seen it, right, or experienced it. Where do you see this all leading for people who can't talk to each other?
I mean, for people who don't talk to each other, it breaks their relationships, right? They have fights with, I mean, on a personal basis, they either have fights with a lot of people or they withdraw from all of their relationships if they don't have the skills to break that. On a societal level, if this doesn't get changed, if this doesn't change, society will break, meaning that we can't cooperate with each other. A society that can't cooperate with each other is is in deep trouble. It can't solve any issues. So I consider this issue zero, not my approach, but that we're in the trance is issue zero for every other issue. You care about immigration or you care about mass migration, you care about climate change, you care about government spending or massive deficits or student debt or redistribution of income, whatever you care about, homelessness, poverty, forget it. Nothing gets solved if we can't cooperate with the other side, particularly in a society like the United States, where it's roughly 50-50 and it just swings back and forth. If your entire energy is dedicated to defeating evil, we accomplish nothing. And so I have a lot of fear for this in society. And my hope is that projects like this help educate people because I don't think there's any education about this. I mean, the enemy trance is a phrase that I made up, and it's something that I've noticed, and it's based on my theories, but also my collection of research that other people have done. And I'm hoping that people understanding that has an impact, but more so that when they watch things like this, they can see, wow, it really, really can be different, even with people I hate. That's really encouraging. And then I think that if something like this doesn't take, or efforts like this don't take, we'll have a break. And so, we will have a break of democracy. We will have a breakdown in society. We will crash, and something new will be created, whatever that is. I hope that doesn't happen, but that's the direction I see it moving, and I think a lot of people do, unless we figure out how to cooperate again.
It's interesting hearing that you came up with these terms. And maybe part of the reason I resonate with them so much is my background is in trauma and addiction recovery. And what you're saying about not even knowing somebody, but immediately needing to stereotype, immediately needing to judge. And that's a trauma survival like coping mechanism, right? If I'm somehow traumatized by somebody who, even in the book "What Happened to You" by Bruce Perry and Oprah, they talk about, right, if there's an association with trauma that this guy wore this type of cologne or deodorant,
Yeah,
my brain, for the sake of protecting me, is immediately going to judge anybody who wears that cologne or that scent to be danger. And that's a way
yeah,
that we protect ourselves, only it's overstimulated, it's
yeah,
oversensitive.
yeah. I see that as well. I mean, our brain is set up, our mind is set up so as to judge what's a benefit and what's a risk. And those of us who've been through something that's deeply traumatic no longer judge risk appropriately. We overestimate risk or underestimate risk. It's just messed up our ability to judge whether something is okay for us. And our reaction to the world then has an impact on the people around us. So that's definitely similar. In addition, the even for people who are not acting from trauma, just people who have not had a deeply traumatic experience which has shaped their ability to correctly judge risk in the world, those people who are at risk, where their mind correctly perceives risk, they too go into the enemy's trance. Like they too will, their empathy will shut down. And they will, once their empathy shuts down, they will become what I call, um, they will have autistic psychopathy in some form. The more their empathy shuts down, the more they will be unable to assess what's happening in the other side, truly what the intentions are of the other side. They can't see it at all. They won't be able to judge reactions, like predict accurate reactions of the other side. They'll make all sorts of errors about what's going on in the mind of the other side, and they'll be willing to hurt the other side. Absolute lunatic behavior that we would put people in jail for if if that if they acted that way throughout their entire life. They would not be able to function in society.
It's It seems like it's almost promoted that way of overgeneralizing today, though. That if I know that you voted for X candidate, there's already a dozen assumptions about you that people
Yeah.
just take as truth without having that curiosity to step back, regulate, and question.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the point of the show, just to show that the people on the other side who we consider to be really terrible, like they must be evil if they voted for Trump or if they voted for Kamala Harris. They must absolutely be evil. How could they not be? That assumption gets us in a lot of trouble. And if you meet those people and you really step back from the politics, you're like, wow, I really like you. Holy cow. And then if you integrate politics into what you've learned about them, like, why are they in favor of this person? Which seems really problematic. Like, I can never understand it. And if I ever talk to you about politics, everything's going to break again. That's not true. Once you really understand the person and you start to have care for the person, you might see errors in their thinking, and that might frustrate you. But you'll think, wow, you're just like me on the other side. Wow, I feel totally different about you. But yeah, in society, it's cranked up because we don't have the skills, because we're not in groups that force resolution. We don't see people really modeling that anymore, and because it's really a path to power to stoke this in people. I call it enemy makers. Enemy making has always been a path to power. There have always been people who politically and economically create enemies because that is why people follow them. But it's very easy in today's society when we have these fractured worlds um, that are created because of our media environment and our social media environment. So particularly a problem given technological changes, and it's not something that we as human beings have had to face before the way we have to now.
This concept of enemy makers, when you think of the left and the right hating each other so much, who's benefiting from that? And what is the benefit for those enemy makers?
The people who benefit are the enemy makers, right? The people, let's say on the right, who run organization like Fox News, or take Fox News out of it, just a far right organization that believes that the people on the left are basically corrupt and evil. Well, when they stoke fear, whether intentionally or unintentionally, in the people who are watching, the people are going to watch more. They just, we're very geared toward threats in the world, and we're going to watch more. And so popularity and political strength rise when you create an enemy. And that happens on the left also. It's not that necessarily the people are bad. They may sincerely believe that the people on the right are evil. But what happens is that their popularity grows as they beat the drums even further. And so people on the left and people on the right, ordinary people, get trapped in this. It doesn't mean that like leaders on the left and leaders on the right aren't evil. It doesn't mean they are. Like, there can be people on the left and the right who are absolutely trying to stoke this, and they don't care about society at all. They just care about their personal power. And you might say that's evil, or that's a person who doesn't care about other people. There can be those people, but the key insight is that the people who follow them, all of us ordinary people, the 99.9% of us, we're just like the same guy on the other side. We just happen to be you're in Cleveland instead of rural Nebraska. If you were in rural Nebraska, you might believe very, very differently than you do and be thinking the other side is really, really evil. And so that's what I'm trying to demonstrate, that there are enemy makers, and they are trying to separate us because their power depends upon it. And it's for us to resist that. The form of rebellion that I'm suggesting is not necessarily devoting all your energy to fighting the other side, but to fighting enemy makers, period. To realizing that we're all being pretty much used, and we're not benefiting, they are. None of us benefit. They do.
I love that you pull how both sides are complicit in this. Because a lot of times we hear something like this of they're controlling or they this, and I know a lot of times it can just be assumed that we're talking about like far right extremists and conspiracy theories, that sort of thing. But when we just look at the sociological structures of power, there are people in power on both sides, and both of them want to stay in power, and they may not have our best interests at heart. And from what you're saying, they are actually benefiting from just getting their side more ingrained
And
on
it's
one side.
really hard to believe about our side because they're our champions, they're our heroes, they're fighting evil. Somebody needs to fight that other side. We
Mm.
can't be complete. We can't just lay down. So they are our champions. So it's really hard for us to see that our side is contributing to this at all. And so it's very hard for people. People believe that the other side has enemy makers. They don't believe that their side does. Their side is just fighting evil. Even if you believe that, which I am highly suspect of that, um, and it's very obvious that people on our on my side benefit from the war. They wouldn't have any power without the war. It'd be a centrist who had power without the war. But even if you don't believe that your side is evil, what I ask you to see is that the ordinary people on the other side take a liberal who says anyone who votes for Trump is evil. Like they are, I cannot understand those people. They are bad people. You then have become the problem from my perspective because you're not seeing that the ordinary person on the other side is you, just sub, just informed somewhat differently. And if you start to get to know that person, you're going to like that person, and you're going to both conclude like, holy cow, we've been used together. In every show, or almost every show, the people together say, I think we've been manipulated together. Wow, the media is the problem here. Leaders are the problem. Like they can't figure out any other solution. Like we, the people, are being used as pawns in a war that we don't want. And so I ask, even if you don't believe that your own side is evil, because that's really hard for people to believe, or that their own side is corrupt in any way, or their own side are enemy makers. Even if you don't believe that, see that the ordinary people on the other side are not your enemies. Because if you treat them like their enemies, they will become your enemies. The worst thing for the Democratic Party is when Hillary Clinton called Republicans deplorables. She called ordinary people on the other side deplorables. Republicans tend to agree with Democrats on policies. They hate Democrats, or a lot of them do. And it's because of that and attitudes like that. If you treat them like an enemy, they will not trust you, and they will want to defeat you at any cost. And they will put in power anyone who can defeat you. Doesn't matter how corrupt. I mean, historically, and lots of studies show this, people who are corrupt, the only way they can lead is by creating an enemy. People will accept all sorts of corruption on their side if they believe the enemy is evil. They will completely overlook it because evil is worse.
Mm. This is hard because I'm right there with you, and yet I also know that there are going to be some people listening that are really struggling here and that are
Yeah,
like, yeah, but
yeah,
they're looking at facts. My
yeah.
side is for
Right,
human rights. My side
right.
is for giving people liberties and
Yeah,
protecting them with the law. And the other side is blatantly not, or blatantly
right.
removing, or blatantly,
So let's say that
um,
that's true. Let's say that's true. And I'm not going to disagree with that.
yeah.
Let's just say that that's true. I'm asking what's the effective way to deal with them? Just what's effective, not what's morally correct. What's morally correct may be for to absolutely, speak about them as if they have a moral problem. It may be to denounce them. You will you will no doubt generate support on your side if you do that. Moral language is the language of war, and you will definitely get people to follow you when you speak it with that language about the other side, and maybe you're right. But is it effective? Because they will regard you as a threat. Moral language is the language of war, and you will absolutely motivate them to fight you at any cost. And so I'm not saying that you're wrong, that that's wrong, uh, incorrect. I'm saying it's ineffective. When you have 50% of the country on the other side, doing that creates a war that you can't win. And so I hope people don't hear it as like a reproach of them ethically. It's just like, just look, has it worked?
Yeah, it seems like since 2016, even 2015, at least on the political side, people are stuck, right? Like they're stuck in a ditch with the other side being the enemy, and it's almost been a decade, and like they haven't been able to see another way out. They're very stuck with they are wrong, and actually, some I'm sure you get some uh, hate for this, where they're actually saying by you saying that we can make peace with them, by you sitting with these people
Oh
who
yeah.
are so atrocious, you're actually now part of the problem by validating or
Yes.
somehow.
Yes. I'm a platformer.
Yeah. So what would you say in those
You know,
cases?
I can't say that they're entirely wrong, honestly. Like, let's say I bring on somebody who is an absolute, Nazi who believes that, let's say, just people of color and Jewish people should be killed. And let's say that person has reasons to feel threatened, and I bring them on. Is that a good idea? You know, I would say no, because by building a bridge to a person like that, they can walk back. That's the positive. You invite them to walk back toward you. You treat them as a human being. You see what problems they have in their life. They could walk back toward you. But the downside is other people could walk toward them, toward their extreme position. And so I'm not, I don't disagree that there's a cost to platforming. I just to be perfectly clear, I just think that you don't platform the people who are on the 1%. But if there's 50% of the people, or 30% or 20%, they are not lunatics. They're seeing something different than you. And if you think that 50% of the people in the country are lunatics, that's a problem. And the problem is in part that you're not seeing them. I want to make clear, though, that I'm not saying that someone, let's say on the left, because I imagine your audience is on the left. I'm not saying that they should think that they should simply lay down and allow whatever they believe is happening in society to happen. I'm not saying that you don't fight. I'm saying that you don't treat ordinary people on the other side as your enemy. Then you're creating your war and your resistance. You treat them as friends, you listen to them, you talk to them. Sure, fight the policies. Sure, protest. But always make clear that the ordinary people on the other side are my friends. They are the ones I care about, and I'm not ever going to abandon them. And they will treat you differently.
Important distinction. And you can see how most people don't think that way because there's not enough room for all that subtlety when we're throwing
Hmm.
memes back and forth at each other, right? Or
Yeah,
having 30
yeah.
second clips to attack the other side. There's not enough room to talk about all these subtleties.
Another thing is to just dismiss me when it comes to political discourse and just watch the show. Like my political theories are mine, but the reality is that you can take from the interchange between two human beings whatever you'll take out of it. This is what I take out of it. That certain ways of approaching people are completely ineffective. There's a different way to do it in society. That's my broader vision. But but there's no denying that it's beautiful, right? And that you can see that two people can change each other. And then you take whatever you want out of that. I don't, I don't have, I'm not right about all things. I know that. It's just the way my mind has structured it. But what I do believe is correct is that human beings, any two human beings can deeply connect and they can solve problems together when they do.
Yeah.
I just did an episode or filmed an episode on gun, and I had two different women, one who they had very, very similar background. Both had incredible trauma in their past, and one grew up to really support ownership as a means of self-protection, and the other as fighting gun ownership or restricting gun ownership to some extent, putting in safeguards as a means of protecting people. I mean, it's really powerful that they just very similar experiences where they both had their brothers almost killed when they were 9 years old and had to take care of their brothers, and then their paths went like this. Um, and both are, from my perspective, really trying to do good. Like you can say that one side is right and one side is wrong, and both people will disagree on which side that is. I have my own views, but what is undeniable from my perspective is that both of these women appear to be trying to save lives. Um, and that they are, they view themselves as good people. Like who views themselves as evil? And so if you call the other side evil, most likely you're just not going to be able to have a conversation with them. That doesn't mean that you need to capitulate. It just means, from my perspective, that there's a different way to have the conversation with them, which is really, really hard, like in normal life, to listen to somebody before you speak. It's just like, gosh, I have so much to say, and you need to hear that you're on the wrong path. We only have a minute. I got to say it to you.
I wonder if a lot of it comes down to emotional regulation and not being able to, where they're so triggered that
Oh
then
yeah.
there's an inability. And I guess I would say that most people are not regulated. They don't have the skills to regulate their emotions. We're not taught this stuff in school, and this is part of the result.
That's true. I think that's entirely correct. Particularly when we're triggered. I mean, how many of us are really good when we're triggered? My dog is a pretty good dog, but if he has another dog that's barking at him, he'll go crazy and you can't slow him down. You know,
Yeah.
he's really well trained, except in that circumstance. Once he's triggered, forget it. And I think we're all that way. Once we're triggered, it's really hard to rein ourselves in. But the other thing is that people who are that way in social movements, meaning not well regulated or who are really vitriolic, very often gain very strong followings. There are built-in incentives to be that way or feedback mechanisms where that's a good way to be. If you rip the other side, you're going to go from 1,000 followers to 100,000 followers in a few days. If your ripping is like really, really deep and you cut into their heart, you might go to 1 million. So, and how many people are listening to the person who's saying the other side actually comes from a good place? Like they have 3 followers. So it's really a problem with our system to some extent, and the feedback mechanisms that are embedded in media and social media, the reward system.
So I'm curious how you grapple with wanting to get this message out to more people, but also not sacrificing your values to do it.
It's a tension because you can see immediately, like on Instagram, that if we post something, particularly if it's a liberal person on the show, really going after conservative person, we can get 500,000 views, 1 million views. Now, it's really important to me, and we can get a bunch of subscribers. They don't know what they're subscribing to, because the message is connection. Now we always post at the end that these you don't know where this is going. These people actually end up liking each other, loving each other. But that type of post will get many more views and subscriptions than one where it's these same two people really deeply understanding each other. And particularly if it's my side understanding your side, then it gets really like if it's a liberal person understanding a conservative person, liberals don't like that very much, and vice versa. So it's not going to get much support from liberals. So the incentives are there immediately. You can see it. Like even with what we're doing, which is trying to promote conversation and understanding as a means of resolving issues, the incentives are there straight up. Like you want we could have, we've been out a few months. We have something like 70,000 subscribers on Instagram. We could probably have 500,000 by now if we just posted the vitriol. You can see it immediately. Like it builds so fast. We're not doing that. I have no desire to be popular in promoting hatred. I think Jubilee, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this station, but they started out with a similar mission, as I understand it, to what I'm doing, which is really trying to help people understand each other. But they've gone in a completely different direction. And I can only imagine it's because the incentives are so clear. Like if you want to make money, you don't do what I'm doing. Now, it doesn't mean that people don't want this. We have a lot of views and a lot of subscribers in a short time, and the people who are watching are very dedicated. Like the messages that they leave, like hundreds, maybe thousands of messages, just like this has shaped me, this has changed me, this is beautiful. So there's a very large group of people who are fairly silent and not in control, because the people on the extremes are in control and that are wanting this. And it's also my belief that it doesn't take a lot of people to change the world. Like it's the people in the middle who are silent, who've been sucked out of the middle, or even forget the middle, people who want to get along with other people who've been sucked out because they've been forced to take a side. Those people, 5% of those people coming together shifts things in our country and in our world. When there's a 50-50 divide, just a few percent change the dynamics of everything. And so my belief is that there are a lot of people, even though the incentives are in the other direction, who want this and want it deeply. And I'm trying to, help them have a voice.
At the end of most of your episodes, it ends with both parties agreeing, where it's like, how do we get this to more people? Like both of them are on the same page that how do we expand this? And I'm curious, what's your vision for this movement?
I
What's
don't know. I mean, I have a lot of efforts that I'm there. There are three different efforts that I'd like to do, which is continue to do what we're doing, film episodes like this on every conflict. Second is I'd like people to be doing this themselves. I want to set ordinary people up in front of Walmart, and do this for 15 minutes and have them film themselves, and all that goes out into the world. So that's the second effort, kind of a I'm listening project. And then the third piece is that I would like all of these videos, and hopefully within a year there'll be maybe 30 or so deep conflicts, political conflicts mostly, that have been deeply analyzed and where you see people really connecting. I want these to be for us to analyze these and for them to be studied in political science departments. I think that is an enormous way to influence the next generation in understanding and in what's effective in actually shifting the other side, shifting them not necessarily out of policy, but to listening to you, to having a conversation with you where they might actually consider what you're saying. So I'm hoping that those three efforts take hold. Um, I I think that they will to some extent, but I think that there've got to be political leaders who also harness the power of people who want to have conversation. And unfortunately, in our society, in the US at least, we have a system that really rewards the extremes through the primary system and through gerrymandering. And so that's really hard. And I don't know what the solution is there, except for the system to break and be rebuilt.
A little bit of a left turn. Why isn't someone like you mediating these big conflicts in the Middle East? It seems like you have such a skill set here. Why are they not using you to solve these much bigger problems?
Well, first of all, I'm just a mediator who helps individuals professionally, right? Like, so this is my first public project. I've done like TED Talk, but this is really my first public project. So who's going to turn to me? They could turn to someone like me, but then maybe in a year they will turn to me. But the second thing is that the process that I'm suggesting is really about individuals connecting. It's really about empowering ordinary people to see that those on the other side are them, and to create a movement where we reject the enemy makers. The enemy makers have very little incentive to want this. And it's not that all people in power are enemy makers. Like I think many of them sincerely care about their people and would want peace if they could have it. But there are all sorts of forces that are pushing them in opposite directions, right? Like Hamas creates the far right in Israel, which creates Hamas, right? They are in a symbiotic relationship. I call it enemy biosis, but basically they create each other. So let's say I brought together Netanyahu and a leader in Palestine who possibly from Hamas. You know, I might be able to bring them together as human beings, but they have political realities that they're reporting back to, and they probably both authentically do want peace, but they also understand that they don't exist in that world as political leaders where there's peace. And so there's a real tear in them. And also politicians are to some extent performing for their audience, so they're less likely to be authentic. So I don't know. Like I haven't tried it with political leaders, but I have some level of suspicion that it ain't going to go as well unless it's not public, right? And I just do this with them for their sake, and then they take it and do whatever they will. Because if they hate the other person a little bit less, they're probably less likely to treat them the same way. It might just be dialed a little bit differently, but I don't think it's going to be some massive breakthrough
Mm.
for them. It's
Because it,
massive breakthrough for ordinary people because we're not as invested in the war. We want to stop it, like if we could. We don't know how.
so it's really asking these people in power who might say that they want peace. It's saying, do you want peace, even if it means that if you achieve peace, you lose your power, right? Like, what's more
To
important
some
to you?
extent, I mean, I think that they're aware of that. Some, I mean, the extremes feed each other, and they are aware of that.
Yeah.
The incentives are very clear to them. Why did Hamas strike just as Israel was about to make peace with, I don't remember who they were about to sign an agreement with, but was it Saudi Arabia? I don't remember who it was, but Hamas struck because they knew Israel would strike back to some extent. Like they were losing their power and they were scared. Now it doesn't mean that Hamas doesn't sincerely care about, I don't know, maybe they don't, but it doesn't mean necessarily they don't care about the Palestinian people. But Israel striking back means that people in the Middle East will hate Israel. And maybe and Israel went really, really far. Like many people would consider to be like absolutely irrationally far in terms of their self-interest. But that really feeds the war machine on both sides. And so and my own belief is that they're aware of it, of course, both sides.
Hmm.
They're in enemy biosis.
I guess I diagnose, right? I look at it
Yeah.
as when people are so stuck in pain or stuck in fear, there's some element of unresolved trauma of some sort that leaves them again stuck in some sort of
You mean
trance.
the leaders?
Yeah.
So I think that that can be the case, right? Like if I'm Jewish, people who've been through a trauma like the Holocaust almost certainly are misdiagnosing risk in the world. Generational traumas, you almost certainly are misdiagnosing risk in the world.
Yeah.
Either you're way over diagnosing, like we are always at risk, or you're wanting to believe that the world is safe. You're deeply wanting that. It can't be like it was. And so you're under, but you're not doing it accurately. It's just the way trauma works. That's almost the definition that we're not going to respond in an adaptive way. So I agree with you completely. And you have the leaders of these countries who are traumatized themselves. Absolutely. Add to that, though, that there are all sorts of incentives for people to create the other side, create enemies on the other side. But I agree with you completely that these people are traumatized, as is probably every single Palestinian,
Yeah.
and as is probably most of the people in Israel. Even if the people in Israel are not dying in the same way, and even if life in Israel is to some extent normal compared to life in Gaza, for sure, the people in Israel are traumatized because they've been through such shit as human beings generations before, and they believe that they are under deep, deep threat. And so you combine all this, and it's like people they can't even assess what's going on. They just know that they've got to protect themselves and their people.
Yeah. Until their pain is understood,
I
acknowledged,
think so. I mean,
seen.
yeah, and there have been a lot of efforts in Israel and Palestine to do this in the past, and people have said to me, "What you're doing is so 1990s. It didn't work." Well, peace doesn't work right away,
Hmm.
and understanding doesn't work right away. And when it was about to work, we had very strong efforts on either side to take out when peace had a chance those people who could create peace and or take out the other side and recreate the war. And so what I'd say is that it hasn't really had a deep chance, and that enemy makers will try to recreate the enemy constantly, and that people have got to see that that's not that they have to, but that if they can see that that's what's going on, like like in my view, Israel overreacted a lot. They didn't see that they were set up. So now I believe that the Jewish people around the world and in Israel are at much greater risk. They were set up to some extent. And even if you don't believe it was a setup, they overreacted and now they've got a war on their hands. The ordinary people did not understand that the best reaction would be to reach toward Palestinians right now. They didn't do that. So it's not like so 1990s and 1990s failed. It's that they haven't gone deep enough into that, people, from my perspective.
And I'm
I
sure
don't
they,
want to be, like create a panacea and like kumbaya and we have all the answers. It's just my view is ordinary people. This is a movement of ordinary people reject what's happening at a political level and create that change. That see, for me, this is a political movement. I know that the show doesn't create that. The show is just two people coming together, and people can make for them from that what they want. But for me, this is a political movement because I can't see any other solution.
It's your form of protest.
Yeah, it is.
How can people support you if what you're saying here is resonating? Of course, we'll drop links to where they can follow you and find you on YouTube, your website, Instagram. But if somebody is really looking to support, they love this idea that you're working on, those three missions that you talked about. Is there any call that you would like to give
Yeah.
for people who can support you more?
Yeah. So I'd say there are a couple of things. Firstly, we're going to have a Kickstarter campaign in a few weeks. And, this is something that I'm funding myself. So I don't make any money at this. It only costs me money. So I would really appreciate the help because it enables us to get, instead of an episode out every 6 weeks, every 2.5 weeks, every 3 weeks. We have 4 episodes right now that haven't been edited because, like, I'm the editor, the content editor. Like, who am I to be a content editor? But, I'm trying to limit the expenses because I fly people in and I have all this equipment and rent. And so we're doing a Kickstarter and that would be really helpful. Um, and that'll be out in a few weeks. And then secondly, in addition to watching the episodes, that helps and getting the word out. I really, really want this I'm listening campaign to take root. And I want to provide people a way to do that, to basically say, I'm blue, I'm listening, and to sit in front of Walmart and just to I'll provide instructions on in 10 minutes how to deeply connect with this person and hear them out. And I want that to happen on a massive scale. I just want the system of seeing the other side as evil to disintegrate a little bit. I think that once it starts to disintegrate and we see the benefit, other movements can take hold. So that one where people are doing it themselves and videoing them and we're putting it out there or other people are putting it out there, I think that is incredibly important. And so I ask people to contact me if they want to do that. And we're going to be starting that effort very soon.
Okay, so stay tuned to your pages for more
Yeah, but
information.
but also reach out if you're interested. Info at
Yeah,
enemiesproject.org, info at enemiesproject.org, because I'll help you get set up.
awesome, awesome. And the third leg that you talked about with uh, having somehow studies or this be taught
Yeah.
to the next generation. Is there anything people can do to support you there?
So that I don't think they can. I mean, again, it comes down to money on that one. We will have a lot of the content necessary to teach this quite soon. But then it has to be packaged and then it has to be kind of put out there to universities, and that takes manpower. And it's hopeful that we're going to get some pretty good funding next year. That's what I'm hoping, not just through Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is not going to, it's a bridge basically to help us get to a place where we can really significantly expand. But it's an important bridge because if we can't get to that place, then I have to fund it myself forever and it will shrink because my funds aren't unlimited.
Sure.
But when we raise more money, then that educational piece is going to be integral. I want to educate. That's my mission. It's just that I'm hyper aware that most people are interested in entertainment, and that's how they're reached.
Hmm. If there's one thing that you were to leave people with from this whole conversation, you gave a lot of nuggets here of wisdom, but if there's one thing that they take away, what would that be?
We have power. We have power to shape our society, and don't sacrifice it to war. It ain't gonna work, and we have power to shape it in a different way. And I'm trying to help that happen, and other people are. And so I say don't lose hope on that, because when we lose hope, then we're just like whatever. I just got to fight this war, and we create it. So don't lose hope. That's what I that's what I want to communicate to people. It is doable, and I truly believe that.
So powerful. Larry, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.